Well, hello there. Hope everybody is doing well. So these are our first set of notes. I just went ahead and listed under linear equations some objectives that we're going to be working on between today and tomorrow. So in tomorrow's lesson, if you're not sure about something, you can always come back and look at today's as they're going to piggyback off one another. So, excuse me. The objectives here say to graph linear equations, to complete a table of values for each equation, to identify the slope of a linear equation in the slope-intercept format, to identify the y-intercept of a linear equation in slope-intercept form, to explain the effects of m on a linear function in slope-intercept form, and number 6, to explain the effects of b on a linear function in slope-intercept form. So those are the concepts that we're going to be looking at and practicing between today and tomorrow. The vocabulary is always here for you to come back and reference. What's a linear function? Well, a linear function is basically used to create, a line. So hence line, linear function. All right, so a parent function. A parent function represents the given function, whether it's a linear function, a parabola, which is quadratic function, an exponential function. So it's kind of like we all have this reset button, and the parent function is the reset button. Your m is 1 and your b is 0, okay? So the most basic form of a function before adding any constants. Slope. Slope is the amount that the function decreases, as the x value changes the m value in an equation in slope-intercept form. So the y-intercept is the point on a graph where the line crosses the y-axis, also known as the starting point of any graph or situation. Slope-intercept form is yes, your y equals mx plus b, or yes, your m is your slope and your b is your y-intercept. So I'll go ahead and write that down. Slope and your y-intercept. Your x-axis runs horizontal from left to right, as you all recall, I'm sure. And then the y-axis runs vertical. Okay, so this is just some vocabulary and things to keep in mind as we proceed in the next couple days. All right, so here, just to give you a quick overview, you're going to have 5 stations. Station 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And what we're going to do as notes is we're going to do the odds together, and as your daily classwork, you're going to do the evens. So with that said, let's go ahead and practice. And what you can do is you have 2 options. One, to print this PDF and then just submit via Google Classroom by taking a picture of them. 2, you can just get a separate piece of paper, write out the equation, and then write in the stuff that they're asking for. So for example, you guys can be doing station 1, write station 1, and the idea is to identify the slope and the y-intercept. So I'm going to do the odds with you. So in this event, y equals 2x minus 7. Thinking back to y equals mx plus b, your m is your slope, which in this case is 2. It's increasing. And your y-intercept is going to be your constant, your negative 7. Please don't forget about the sign that is associated with that term. All right, so our y-intercept. So we're just looking at y equals mx plus b right now. Notice that the highest exponent here, there's an imaginary 1. And when that's the case, you know you're dealing with a linear function. Okay, if it was a 2 or a 3, then it would not be linear and we would just classify it as nonlinear. All right, let's take a look at number 3. y equals -2. Well, for y equals versus x equals equations, they're special equations. In this case, sorry, I'm trying to click on this. A y equals a -2 would give you a graph something like this. So for example, on the y-axis, it's at -2. Here's -2. And at -2, we put a horizontal line. Sorry, it's a little off, but overall you probably get the idea. So a y equals a number I like to refer to as hoy. And the reason why is that it kind of goes, it's for a horizontal line. It has a 0 slope, and it's a y equals an equation. Okay, y equals a number. So hoy, horizontal, gives you all the aspects of a horizontal line when it's just a y equals a number equation. Opposed to the alternative, what I like to say is vux, vux, for a vertical line with the slope is undefined, and it's an x equals a number equation. So the slope here is going to be a 0 slope, and the y-intercept is where it touches the y-axis, which happens to be the -2. I'm just going to connect this dot and go -2. So to write it as an ordered pair, it's going to be 0, -2. You know you have a y-intercept when your x value is 0. Okay? All right, so now let's look at number 5. Now we're looking at a graph. So in this example, for numbers 5 and 6, we're going to identify the slope, the y-intercept, and write an equation. Now remember, the two things that you need to write a linear equation is m and b. Those are the only things that you need to write an equation. So the first thing I guess I'll go ahead and find is the slope. Now, before we even actually get to that, my apologies, we have to recall how to read a graph. Okay, so to read a graph, you look to the farthest left point of the graph. So this is the furthest left, this is the furthest right of the graph. So we always read from left to right, just like we're reading a book, we always read left to right. And from left to right, the graph is going up. Think about a roller coaster. On a roller coaster, you're going up, 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 up until you don't anymore. Just kidding. Okay, so we would say that this has a positive slope and it is increasing. So that's important to know too. So I'm going to say this graph is increasing as it moves from the furthest left point to the right up. Now the next thing I'm going to do is actually find the value of that slope. Now remember, slope is your up over down, rise over run. Okay, so that is your slope. So I find 2 points is what I need to do first. So to find 2 points is I could use this point and this point. Any point that basically intersects the grid. So you see how the line goes through the grid right here and right here. It misses here. So now essentially I have my 2 points, so I can do my rise, 1, 2, 3, and my run. So my rise is 3, again, 1, 2, 3, and my run from left to right is 1. So my rise in this case is 3, and my run is 1. But we could simplify that because anything over 1 is itself. So this is just a positive slope of 3. All right, so the next thing that we need to look at is the y-intercept. Well, the y-intercept, just like in the vocabulary above, is where does the graph touch the y-axis? Well, if you see clearly, here's your y-axis, so let's count. Here's 1, 2, 3, 4. So the y-intercept happens at 0, 4. Okay, so in this case, like I said in the beginning, in order to write the equation for a line, we need m and we need b. So we said our m is 3 and our b is 4. For the y-intercept, they're the same thing. So now I can go ahead and write it in the form of y equals mx plus b. All right, so y equals the slope, which is your m, which is associated with the x variable. It's the coefficient of x. And then your b is your constant, which is a positive 4. Okay, so you guys would go ahead and do the evens. I do need you to write on the heading, and I'll go over this with you because it's your first assignment. All right, so we did the odds. You will go back and do the evens. All right, station 2, we'll continue. All right, so station 2, write the equation of the line given the slope and the y-intercept. Okay, so again, we want this in y equals mx plus b. So we have our m and we have our b. Perfect. So we're just going to go y equals a negative 2/3 x plus 1. Done. Same thing. Y equals a negative 1/3 of x plus 3. Again, y equals a positive 8/3 of x plus 5. Number 7, y equals a positive 4x. We do not need to put plus 0 since the y-intercept is 0, so we just know that the y-intercept is 0 if there's nothing there. And finally, we have this last one, number 9. Y equals a negative 5/2x plus 4. So you guys would write out for these ones, you'd put number 10. You can just write it in slope-intercept form just like we did, as I did a second ago. All right, so let's look at this word problem here. Let's put this all into perspective now. We've been given the slope, we've been given the y-intercept, and we were able to easily write a linear equation. So let's go ahead and do that given a situation. We just need to identify M and RB. So it says you are visiting Baltimore, MD and a taxi company charges a flat fee of $3 for using the taxi and 75 cents per mile. So let's envision this. All right, we're going to, let's see, a taxi charges a flat fee of $3. So just to hail down the taxi right out the gates, we get in the car, we owe him $3. Plus, we owe him 75 cents per mile that we go. So write an equation that you could use to find the cost of the taxi ride in Baltimore. Let x represent the number of miles. So x is the number of miles and y represents the total cost. All right, so how much would a taxi ride? Okay, so let's get to that question next. Let's first come up with our equation. So in this example, y equals, now the flat fee is like your constant. This is going to be your b. While the the 75 cents per mile, okay, so if you go 5 miles, 10 miles, you're going to multiply that by 75 and add 3. This is going to be your m, your slope. Okay. So we can go ahead and write that. So we're going to get charged 75 cents per mile plus the $3 fee for just hailing it down. All right. Let's go ahead and take a look at the next question. So this is part A. Part B, how much would a taxi ride for 8 miles cost? So if 8 miles, x represents the number of miles, they want to know if x equals 8, how much would this taxi ride cost? So I'm going to go ahead and substitute that in. So y equals 0.75 times the 8 miles plus the $3 fee. Okay, so if I take the 75 cents and multiply that by 8, I get 6 plus the $3. the total cost for getting the taxi and going 8 miles would be $9. All right, so this is the answer to B. And C, it says, if a taxi ride cost $15, how many miles did the taxi travel? So now, because we know that Y represents the total cost, we can actually substitute that value in. So if I spent $15, okay, we know it's 75 cents per mile. We're solving for X, and we know that the startup fee is $3. Okay, so basically it says how many miles did the taxi travel? So again, we need to solve for X this time, because X represents the number of miles. So solving equations, we know that, I know it's been a minute or two, we're going to start by isolating the term that contains the variable. So we're going to undo by subtracting 3 from each side. So 15 minus 3 is 12, which equals, bring down the 75 cents per mile. Okay, and now to undo the 0.75 times, we do the opposite of multiplication, which is division. We're going to divide both sides by the 75 cents to isolate X. And now we're going to simplify. 12 divided by the 75 cents gives us 16, which equals X. So that must mean that if they spent $15 on the taxi, they had to have gone 16 miles. All right, so let's see here. All righty. Let's take a look at station 3 now. Station 3 says sketch the line of each graph. So now we're going to go ahead and graph this. All right, so again, we're going to just do the odds for notes. So whenever we graph, we always begin with the b, so it's y equals mx plus b. So y equals mx plus b. B is where you begin with the y-intercept. So you start with making a point at 2. And then from there, you go to your slope, which in this case is a -2. So I'm going to turn that into a fraction by putting a 1 under it. And so now, don't forget that there is a negative here. So you go back to the y-intercept at 2. And now we're going to go down to right 1. So down to right 1. Okay. So we're going to have a point here. And you can do that throughout the grid. Down 2, right 1, down 2, whoops, down 2, right 1. Now the opposite holds true. The opposite of down 2, right 1 would be up to left 1. Okay, so up to left 1. And so I'm just taking the time to kind of go over with you guys how to graph and slope-intercept form again. So if you need to rewatch this part, you can pause it and rewind. And at this point, I'm just going to go ahead and connect the dots. And now I have my linear equation. Now, just to remind you, this is a -2 as a slope. So that means the graph must be decreasing. So to be decreasing, just remember, you find the furthest left point of your graph, because remember, we always read from left to right. From left to right, it is going down, therefore it decreases and has a negative slope. So if you're on a roller coaster ride, this would be the fun part of it. For some. Okay, and so the y-intercept on this one would be the point at which the graph touches the y-axis, and that is at 0, 2. Now, unfortunately, my line is a little off, but you guys get the gist. All right, so maybe I do fix that line because it's a little off, at least to make it go through. There, better. All right, so let's look at number 3 now. Okay, number 3, again, the slope is decreasing. And, all right, so the slope is a negative 5/2, and the b is a negative 1. We always begin, and I like to say it this way, by by, that's your y-intercept, by graphing the y-intercept at negative 1. From there, we can go down 5, right 2 if we have enough room, down 5, right 2, down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right 2. So it would just be here. But sometimes if you don't have enough room to do that, so at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2. Okay, so you know this is a point on your graph. You can always go in the opposite direction. So the opposite of down 5, right 2 would be up 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, left 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, left 2, right to here. Okay, and again, from left to right, this should decrease considering there's a negative slope. And it is. So we're good to go. All right, so number 5. In this example, again, our slope, it is 2, but I'm going to make that into a fraction because I know I'm going to do a rise and a run. So I could go 2/1, and the y-intercept is at negative 2. So we begin by graphing the y-intercept, which is your b. Go to the y-axis at negative 2. And from there, we're going to rise 2, run 1 to the right. Rise 2, run 1 to the right. Rise 2, run 1 to the right. Now, the opposite of up 2, right 1 from the y-intercept is going to be down 2, left 1. All right, so here we have plenty points, and you only need a minimum of 2 points to graph a line. So I'm just reviewing with you guys. I know it's been a cool couple weeks. All right, so again, this is station 3. We have station 4 and 5, and then we're done for today as far as notes. All right, so station 4, y equals mx plus b or y equals mx minus b. This is just to tell you that the b could be positive or the b can be negative. So, but the standard way we say it is y equals mx plus b. So now we're looking at tables. So equation A, y equals 2x plus 1. Fill in the table of values. So right away, we know our slope is 2. We know m equals 2, and our b is a positive 1. Now, we also know that the b is the y-intercept. So when x is 0, y is 1. Now, keep that in mind because if you look over here at the table of values, whenever you have x as 0, you know you have a y-intercept. So I'm going to go ahead and just fill that in. Okay, so in this case, let's go ahead and answer the following questions after we fill in the chart. So we're going to substitute the values of x and solve for y. So in this case, we're going to go y equals 2 times the quantity of x plus 1. So I'm going to start by letting x equal a negative 2. I substitute. And remember, between these two variables, we always multiply. So 2 times a negative 2 is a negative 4. We're going to bring down the positive 1, and then we add to get a negative 3. So when x is a negative 2, y is a negative 3. All right, let's go to the next one. Y equals 2 times x plus 1 So in this case, I'm going to let x equal a negative 1. So 2 times a negative 1 is a negative 2 plus 1, which gives me a negative 1. So to prove that our y-intercept is at 1, we're just going to look at this. When x is 0, 2 times 0 is 0. You're just left with a positive 1. And sure enough, that's what we got for our y-intercept. All right, so now we're going to just plug in these last two. 2 times 1 is 2 plus 1 gives us a 3. And then finally, 2 times 2 is 4 plus 1 gives us a 5. All right, so that's just kind of how we would show some work here. Answer the following questions. What is the slope of the function? Okay, so we already know the slope is 2. Okay, we identified that from the function. What is the y-intercept? Well, the y-intercept is at 0, 1. We see that in the equation and the table of values. How is this line different from the line of the parent function y equals x? Write your answer in complete sentence. Well, in y equals x, there are no transformations being made. Your m is 1 and your b is 0 when it comes to the parent graph. So again, it says, how is this line different from the line of the parent function y equals x? Write your answer in complete sentence. So for me, I might say something to the effect of, because they want to know how is the line different. So this one has a slope of 2. This function has a greater slope of 2 and a y-intercept of 1. All right, so equation B, we're going to call that your practice. So you need to do, you're going to complete all the evens because I did all the odds. You're going to do the evens, but don't forget to do example B. So you do B as well. Okay, I'll go over that at the end. All right, and don't forget, I meant to come over here and tell you that your slope here is a negative 1, and you can turn it into a fraction by putting a 100, okay? Because the coefficient of any variable without a number is always 1. All right, so last station, home stretch, guys. You got this. All right, so let's read the situation here. Danielle is short on cash. She starts off borrowing $1 from her mother on Monday. Unfortunately, she ends up borrowing $2 each day after that until payday. Which graph represents the amount of money Danielle will owe her mom when payday comes? Write the equation of the graph. Part B says rewrite the equation in slope-intercept form. Y equals mx plus b. Okay, so we're going to actually come back to that. What I want to focus on right now is how to convert from standard form to slope-intercept form before we apply this real quick. So I'm going to do the odds. And I think for right now, actually, we're just going to go ahead and just stick to conforming from standard form to slope-intercept form. And any form, get it to graphing form, which is slope-intercept form. All right, so in this example, we need to get this into, rewrite the equation in slope-intercept form, which is your y equals mx plus b. Identify the slope and the y-intercept. All right, easy enough. All right, so here we need to get y by itself. So in order to isolate the y, we need to get rid of the 6. So because it reads 6 times y, to undo multiplication, we're going to divide by what we're trying to get rid of, which is 6, because anything divided by itself is 1y. But what I do to one side, I do to everything on the other side. So 3 over 6, if we reduce that, 3 goes into 3 one time, and 3 fits into 6 two times. So as you know, 3/6 is equivalent to 1/2 of x. And now we're going to simplify 18 divided by 6, which is a positive 3. Okay. All right, so now our slope is 1/2 and our y-intercept is at 0,3. Guys, again, at any time, if you need to feel like you have to take a break to breathe and come back to it, by all means do so. All right, so that was number 1. Let's do number 3 now. So this case, I need to do a couple things. I'm going to start by moving my mx to the right side, and then I'll do what we just did in example number 1 and divide everything by 3 to get the y by itself. So here we go. I'm going to go ahead and, in order to get rid of a minus 15x, I'm going to add 15x, so they offset each other and cancel out. They're inverses of one another. So I'm going to bring down the 3y, which equals 15x minus 15. Then from here, I'm going to do what we did in the example number 1 to break up the multiplication of 3 times y. We're going to divide it out, and what we do to one side, we do to everything on the other. So we get y equals 15 divided by 3 is 5x. And then negative 15 divided by a positive 3 is a negative 5. So our slope here is a positive 5, while our y-intercept is at 0, negative 5. Okay, so always if mx are on the same side, if your ax and your by are on the same side, get rid of the mx first and then divide out to isolate the y term. All right, so we did 1, 3, and we'll do 5. We'll do one more, but if at this time, I would recommend that you pause it and try it on your own. So you can just have scrap paper, because these are going to be your video notes and for you to go back to. So if you want to pause and try it on a piece of scratch paper, by all means, let's do so. All right, so I'm assuming you're coming back after pausing and you're solving for solving for slope-intercept form. So in this case, I need to get my mx on the right side. So in order to do that, I'm going to add 5x, but what I do to one side, I do to the other. So what I have is these cancel out because they're opposites of each other. So I'm going to bring down the positive 2y, which equals 5x minus 8. And lastly, to break up the multiplication, I divide out the 2, and what I do to one side, I do to everything on the other. So I end up with y equals 5 over 2x. Negative 8 divided by 2 is a negative 4. So now my slope is 5 over 2, and my y-intercept is at 0, negative 4. All right, so that's your odds, and that is the last station. So what are you going to do? Well, you're going to go back to the beginning, okay? Again, this is just your vocabulary. You are going to go ahead and write on the top of your piece of paper. So for example, let's see, station 1, you've got 2, 4, 6, okay? So you could go open up, you can get a piece of paper, and you're going to start with, you could write station 1, and you're going to do number 2. For me, station 1, you can write out the equation, and then you're basically going to write all this stuff out and complete it. You're going to do that for 2, 4, and for number 6, you're probably good with a 7 by 7 grid. Actually, you don't even need to draw the graph. You just need to fill this part in for number 6. Okay, this is going to be assignment number 1. So when you start this, let's go ahead and say this is the top right hand corner. Put your name. I'd put, sorry, my pen just went off. Okay, so I would write your first and last name. And this is assignment number 1, so we're going to put that in the right hand corner. And then you can start with just writing station number 1, and then put number 2, write out the equation. And I think it asks for the slope and the y-intercept. And then just go on, and then when you get to station 2, put station 2 in the problems. When you are done, remember, you're going to go ahead and take pictures of your work and upload it in the According Google assignment on Google Classroom. There is a how to take a picture of your work and upload it to your Google Drive and or Google Classroom that I've already made. It's in the day 1 agenda if you'd like to refer to it. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Again, you do not need to print out any of this stuff. I will upload the PDF notes for today so that you have something to reference it, not without the video. And that's basically all I could think of as of right now. So obviously, guys, we're going to be doing some tweaking. We're going to work this out so that it benefits you guys to the best of my ability. So please, any feedback that you could share that might be helpful, I'd greatly appreciate it. All right, guys, have a